Hey, what is going on, guys? My name is Anson, and today I am going to show you guys how to build a multi-step form. So we are going to be building this entire thing from scratch. So we're not going to be using any third-party library. The only third-party library that we will be using is React Hook Form, and that's just only going to be for form validation. But other than that, this is just going to be our own, our own React multi-step form. So how exactly does this work? Well, basically, let's say if you have an application, and let's just say your application might have different steps to the registration process. So let's just say you want to collect a whole bunch of details from the user, but you want to split it up instead of putting everything all on one form. So we can do that by simply having a step. So for example, this is the first step. We have the first and last name. So let's just type in a random name. So let's just type Jake, and then if I were to actually try to proceed to the next step without entering a value for last name, this happens, and this is just taken care of with React Hook Form. So let's go ahead and click next. So there you go, and then we can see that we have this a little progress bar, not progress bar, but a little, it shows us like which step we're on. Not the best, but this is optional. I will include this in the tutorial, but we'll leave that all the way in the end or for part 2. So now if I try to type in an email, a blank email, it's going to say email is required. And if I try to type in something that's invalid, I have the default type set to email for the input field. Okay. And you can also perform your own email validation too by calling some API if you want to. So let's click next. Now the mobile form, right now it just assumes only US standard numbers, but if I type in like letters in here, it's going to say invalid mobile number. If I try to enter an empty mobile number, it will say mobile is required. Okay, so it's just 10 digits excluding the country code. Okay, and last but not least, we have the review step. And then you click on submit, and anything can happen. So let's just say when you click on submit, you can call some API, or you might want to do something else, right? Whatever you want to do. And from here on, you can go to, the way I have it set up is that it will go to 2 different steps. So it will go to success if everything goes well, and it will go to error if something fails, right? The API call, for example, failing. So that's just going to be pretty much it for this tutorial. So let's go ahead and actually get started with building this. Alright, now the very first thing we are going to do is we're going to create a brand new project. So we're going to use create React app to create this. So let's just do that. So npx create React app. And I'm going to go ahead and just use regular JavaScript. So let's just call this React form steps. So yeah, we're not going to use TypeScript. We're just going to use regular JavaScript. Alright, so the React project is done setting up. So we're going to go ahead and cd into React form steps. And our package manager, well, mine is Yarn. But you could just use any package manager you want. There's npm, there's Yarn, and there's others out there. You can use whatever you want. I'm going to use Yarn for this video. But you guys can just use npm and it would work just fine. Okay, so we have our React form steps project. So let's go into our source folder. And let's just go ahead and get rid of all of the unnecessary code that we will not need. So I'll go ahead and just get rid of the app.css file, the logo.svg file. There's a lot of files that we don't need. So let's just make sure that we don't need to worry about those. So I'll get rid of the app.test file too. Logo.svg. Let's get rid of, I think these are fine. We'll leave these alone. For the CSS, I'll just get rid of everything. I like usually doing everything from scratch. Okay, good. So that's just pretty much getting rid of all of the boilerplate. So now, let's just install the packages that we need. So the only package that we'll need, or packages that we'll need, is React Hook Form. So this is for yarn add React Hook Form. Okay, so this is for the form validation. Now this second one that we're going to install is styled components. Okay, so we're going to install styled components for styling our application and React Hook Form for the form validation. Now, if you were to use npm as your package manager, you would just type npm install and then these two dependency names instead of yarn add. So just wanted to point that out there for those who use npm. All right, so let's go ahead and start up our application. So yarn start, and this will run it on port 3000 by default. Okay, so there's our project. Okay, great. So the very first thing that we'll need to do is let's go ahead and actually create the forms that we need. So we'll need a total of 3 forms, but this could be literally as many as you want based on how many steps that you want. Okay, so for our case, since we only had 3, with the contact, email, and mobile, we're only gonna have 3. So I'll create a folder called components, and this is where I'll create all my forms. So we'll start off with let's do the first one, which is just the first name and last name, so contact form.jsx. Let's go and create one for email.jsx, and let's create one for mobile form.jsx. Okay, and we'll get to these other files later. I just wanted to create them just to get started. Okay, so basically we're gonna have a total of 3 forms, and we'll also have a final review step. So review form, or let's just call this review form details.jsx. Okay, so that's a total of 4 steps. Well, actually, we'll have 2 more steps, one for an error and one for success. So let's create those. So success step.jsx, and then error step.jsx. I know we're creating a lot of files, but don't worry. The only one that we'll worry about is the contact form, right? So I'm just creating all of these files just so that we don't have to worry about them later. And we'll stick with that for now. Okay, so let's create the form. So we are going to be using styled components to make everything look awesome. So let's go ahead and create a named export. So export const contact form. Okay, and our contact form is basically just going to have a couple of input fields. So we're only going to have 2, but you could have as many as you want. So let's just go ahead and return a form, and we're going to do some styling for our inputs. So if you saw back in the demo earlier, we basically want our form to actually look like as close as possible. I actually have a wireframe that I can show you guys just so I can have it for reference. Yeah, let me actually pull that up. Okay, so I have the wireframe over here. So this is just a simple design. So we have our input fields and we have our button. The most styling that we'll do is really just getting the input fields and the buttons, and that's pretty much going to be it. The hardest styling that we'll have to really worry about is just getting the label with the input value, which really that's not going to be super difficult. All right, so let's go ahead and we're gonna actually do this. So what I like to do is I usually like to create a separate file called styles.jsx, and this is where I will have everything that has to do with styled components. Now there's other ways that you can style your components, like there's other ways that you can do this, like if you want to have the style file like in the same file as components, you can do that. Like if you want to create a separate folder, for example, call this contact form, and then inside here you would have your component, and then you can create a file called contact form.style.jsx. You could do that. I personally don't like doing that. I have done it before. I've had different types of folder structures before. But I like doing this because it's just easy for me, because I like having everything in just one file when it comes to CSS, because it just makes it easier for me to just put everything in one file and never have to look at it ever again, because CSS is can kind of get disgusting sometimes. So let's go ahead and create export const, and we're gonna go ahead and style our inputs. So let's create a named export for input. And the way we styled components is we first we have to make sure we import the entire styled components module. Next, we're going to go ahead and reference styled, and then we're going to use the dot operator and reference the HTML element that we want to style. So this is going to actually allow us to style whichever HTML element that we want. So I want to style an input field, so I just type style.input, and now I can actually use this input field like a regular input as is, and it would work just fine if I were to actually render the contact form. So let's go ahead and do that. You can see that we have the contact, we have the form right over here with the input field. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit, and we can literally use it as this. We don't need to actually worry about styling it anymore, right? Because it literally works the same way, but the only difference is that with style components, we can actually easily style everything, and we can just render it as a regular component. We don't have to worry about importing any CSS files, referencing any class names. We don't have to worry about that. You could still use class names and IDs and reference them inside the CSS like this, like, you know, some class name like that, or some, you can reference it like this if you want to, but we'll save that for another time. We'll only do that if we need to. Okay, so let's style our input, and before we style our input, we are going to need a couple more things. So we're going to need the input label. So I'll just call this, I'll call it input label, and we'll call it a style.label. So you literally, there's a lot of different HTML elements. I think you can style every single one. If not all, I'm pretty sure you can style all of them. So we're gonna go ahead and create another style component, and we'll call this input container, or you can call it input field. But all this is just gonna be a div, and it's just going to basically wrap input label. That's literally all this is going to do. So the way that it's going to work, if you look at the mock, right? So we have this label. So this first name is going to be the label, and this part over here is going to be the input. So these two are going to be different elements, but we want to wrap everything to look like they're together. So we're going to wrap everything inside a field, and the field is going to have the background color with the border. Okay, so just wanted to point that out. And we're also going to have an error message, so const input error message. Actually, yeah, we'll leave it like this. And I'm not sure what I want this to be. I think this will actually just be a div. So yeah, we'll leave this as a div for now. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead, and before we style anything, let's actually just import all of our style components, and let's see what this is going to look like from like an HTML perspective, right? So we're gonna have our input field. Okay, so this is going to wrap our input label. So this is going to wrap our input label and input field, or not input field, just input. Okay, now the input label is actually going to be needed to be wrapped inside another div. The reason why is because, and I don't have this on the wireframe, but we want to have an error message that's being displayed, because error messages, you know, make your application a lot more, you know, user-friendly, right? Because if an error happens, you want to make sure the user knows what's going on. So we can have something like first name required. So just like you saw in the demo, we want to have that error message being displayed. And this error message is going to be displayed on the same line as the label, okay? At least that's how I'm going to do it. So I'm just going to create a div, and I think it'd be better just to create like a separate component to at least describe what this div is for. But I feel like it would just be really weird. To be honest with you, it's kind of weird. It would be weird wrapping this inside like an input error, if you know what I mean. Like, so I'll just leave it like this for now. I'll leave it like this. But it's fine though, because I can just simply set the HTML4 attribute for input label. So let's just set that to first name. And we're going to do that because we want to make our input fields more accessible. So we're going to give our input field an ID, of course. So this label is going to be for this input right over here. So you want to make sure the IDs match the HTML4. Okay. If this was last name, we'll put this as last name. All right, so let's go ahead and copy and paste this, and let's do the same thing but for last name now. So first, so same thing for last name, and if I go to our app, we can see that they're over here. Perfect. Okay, so that's good. Now let's actually get to styling our input field. So the input field is going to be responsible for having the border. It's going to have the background color, and it's also going to change the border to red whenever an error happens, like whenever the form is invalid, okay, or the form field, sorry. So let's go ahead and handle that first. So let's go ahead and set the background color. So I have the colors already, so I'm just going to go ahead and reference them. So we have the background color for here, and we'll set the border, and the border is going to be, let's see, let me just get the actual CSS for that. So the border for this input field is going to be 1 pixel solid, and I want to get the RGBA value. So it's going to be a white color with 10% opacity. So RGBA 255, 255, 255, and then 10%. Okay. So let's just see what that looks like. Okay, so nothing super fancy. So right now this is what the input field looks like, and we can see our input field, our input over here is just like it's not spanning the entire thing. So let's fix that. So we're gonna go into input, and we're gonna go ahead and set the width to 100%. So this is going to basically go all the way across. Now it's going to overflow the input field, and to fix that, we can actually set the input field to overflow, or not overflow, box sizing border box, and that should wait, no, I'm sorry. Well, we should set that, but we should also do the same thing for input. There we go. So that will fix the overflow that you see. Okay, because I think by default there's actually margin in our CSS, but we should actually get rid of that. Any additional margin? Yeah, there we go. So that's also one problematic thing. Okay, but setting the box sizing to border box will make sure that it'll basically make sure that if you have any padding or any margin, that will also be included in the width as well. All right, so now that we have fixed that issue with the input field going over the input, or I keep saying input field, I should just say input going over the input field. Okay, so when I say input field, I mean the container. You know what? Let me actually just call this a container, because I keep confusing it, and it's getting, I don't want to confuse you guys. So let me go ahead and just change that to input container, and I'll call input field the actual input field where you enter stuff in. I think that will make it less confusing, because I don't want to confuse you guys, okay? Okay, so now that we have the input container, the style set up, let's go ahead and remove the outline and border. So outline none. Okay, so whenever I focus on the input field, that border will not be there. We can also add our own too, but we'll do that later. For now, we'll just set it to none for now. I usually like to set them to none, so that way I can think of a better idea for a nice border around these input fields. Okay, so one more thing is, let's set the input field, the background color of the input field, let's set it to inherit, because right now you can see that we have this white color, but we want it to actually look, we want it to be the color of the input container. Okay, so that is pretty much it. That's pretty much most of it right now. Okay, so now we just need to add the label. So let's just provide the children attribute for the input label, and let's just go ahead and say last name. So I know we're kind of doing this backwards. So we have last name, and we'll do the same thing for first name. Now in React, you can just pass in the children attribute and pass in like the prop there, and that's just kind of a short way of just doing input label, last name, and then using a closing tag. Okay, we'll just leave it like this for now. Cool, so we have our first and last name. Now let me actually go ahead and grab a font from Google, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the DM Sans font. That's the one that I used in the mockup. So it's just this font right over here, and we're just going to select the regular, and that'll do for now. And for importing, I'll just import it using the @imports tag, and I think that should I think this tag itself should be fine. So there's a lot of ways that you can import your CSS. You can do it inside the index.html file inside the public file over here. They have the link. You can import as a link over here, or you can just use an import. But I think importing it here should just be fine. So let me go and set the font family to DM Sans. And let's just see if that fixes the font. There we go. So the font has been changed. And if I were to get rid of this, you can see that it would just go back to the original font. Cool. Okay, great. Great. Now, if I were to type in here, the font, I think the font is the older font. We'll have to fix that. Okay. So let's set the colors now to the appropriate colors. So I'll set the color to input container to white, though that won't affect the input field. So let's just set that color to white as well. And I think we do need to set the font family manually to DM Sans. Or maybe I was wrong. Maybe it already actually did change it. Yeah, I had a feeling it should, because we have this asterisk, which should pretty much set the styles for everything. So if I leave this to body, it should just be, I think it should be fine. We'll leave it like this for now. Though maybe I just can't really tell. I don't know. Anyways, let's continue. So we're gonna go ahead and add some padding to our input container. So you can see right now I gave it a padding of 20 pixels. You can give it whatever you want. It's just up to you. For now, I think 20 pixels might be a little bit too much, at least for top and bottom. So what I'll do is, for top and bottom, we'll do 10 pixels. Left and right, we'll do 20 pixels. There we go. I think that should be a little bit better. Now we have another problem here. You can see that if I were to type, you can see that if it's empty, it wouldn't be that noticeable, especially if you don't have a cursor. But we have the cursor, and you can see that even with the cursor showing, the input field is actually a little bit off. It's more pushed to the right, and that's because it actually has some padding. So we can actually just get rid of that padding, that default padding, and that should fix it. Okay, there we go. So we can see that they're both aligned vertically, and that's great. Now we're also going to go ahead and change the font size of the label. We want the label to be a little bit smaller in font size, so we can change it to maybe 12 pixels, maybe, or we can maybe do 14 pixels. You can also use EM units, so 1 EM, or we can maybe do 9 EM. So that way, because with EMs and REM, they will scale. With pixels, they won't really scale. But I think just for this tutorial, just to make things simple, I'll just use 14 pixels for now. And for the input field, we'll set the font size to 16 pixels. Hopefully that font size is not too big. Let's try 18. Okay, and I think what I'll do is I'll actually add some margin in the input field. So margin top. Let's try 10 pixels top and bottom, and then left and right we'll do 0. Might be a little bit too much, but you know, with CSS, you really just gotta play around with the styling a little bit before you can really get one that you like. It really takes a lot of time and practice. So we'll also set the same thing for the margin for the label. It's a little bit hard to actually notice because I'm alt-tabbing a lot. And label might actually not give us the margin because, let's see. Yeah, there we go. That's probably why it's not giving us a margin. Because we have a display of, I think by default, label is display of inline. So I just want to make sure that the margin from the top of the label is going to be the same margin from the bottom of the input field. Okay, so I think what I'll do is margin top, we'll leave that as 4 pixels for input label, and then margin bottom, we'll leave this as 4 pixels. And we can always change it to, like, if I want to do 8 pixels, I think that would be that wouldn't be too bad. That might be actually be, yeah, that might be a little bit too much. So again, just gotta play around with it. Okay, cool. So let's not focus too much on the CSS for now. We can always worry about that later. Okay. So now that we have that, let's also see if we can style the HTML error real quick. So let's go ahead and set an error message. So first name required. We'll just hard code it manually for now, just so that we can see it in the DOM, so we can actually style it. So these two need to be on the same line. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and just create a component called flex. And this component is literally just going to have a display of flex, but we can reuse it though. So flex, display of flex, and then we'll just import it like that. I mean, you don't need to. You don't need to do this. You can just use like inline styling if you want to. And what I'm gonna do is I want the items in this flex box to be on the opposite side. So what we'll do is we'll set align items to justify between, and we'll also, I'm sorry, not align items, justify content to space between, and then align items will be set to center. But we'll pass them in as props. So align items will be center, and then justify content will be space between. Okay, and now with styled components, we can easily just reference these props like this. So using template literals or a template string, we can evaluate the props. So props, let's just do, whoops, not this. We have to actually specify the CSS property. So let's do justify content first. So that'll be props, and then props dots justify content, which is the name of the prop. Okay, so now you can see that this will go all the way to the end, and let's just do the same thing for align items. So align items, and this is why I like styled components. You can build reusable components. This should actually go onto the same line, but I'm not sure. Just like on the space between align items, flex with. All right, so right now it seems like let's see. I think the error message as well as the label are not on the same line. So to fix that, it's because input label has this margin top. So I think the better thing to do is we'll just go we'll just add the margin top for both, as well as the font size. So input error and input label will share the same styles. So let me go ahead and just make sure. It seems like, yeah, it seems to be okay. And let's go ahead and set the color of this to a red color. Okay, cool. And yeah, seems to be good. Seems to be just about fine. I'm not really too happy with the. I think I might actually increase the margin of the input fields, the top and the bottom, because it looks too close to the label, and I don't really like that. Okay, so that should be fine. Don't want to spend too much time on the styling, but once we get this styling down, everything else, like the other styling, like we don't. This is probably like the last thing that we have to worry about. Once we finish this, everything else we just have to actually get to React. So I don't mind spending a little bit more time on it just to make sure that we have a nice looking UI. Now for the border radius, we'll set that to 5 pixels. Okay, so you can kind of see that on the edges. Okay. And now we just need to add some margin. But we'll add the margin not on the actual input containers, but we'll actually take care of that. Well, what we'll do is we'll just manually set a margin, or we could just put we could just wrap these inside a div, and then like add some, add margin for the input containers. But for now, we'll just use inline styling. The reason why I don't want to just manually add margin for input container is because I feel like that'd be bad practice because you would want to like allow the user to customize the component, but you don't want to actually have built-in margins. You know, like it would be kind of annoying. So we'll just like allow the user. Let's say if we were to build a, let's say if we were to make this component reusable, or if we were to abstract it into a UI library, you wouldn't want to just add like unnecessary margins. You would want the user to, you know, be able to add their own margins. I mean, it's really up to you, but if you guys disagree, let me know and let me know why. And I'm always, you know, open to discussion. So let's go ahead and add some margin. So I think we'll do margin top 10 pixels and bottom. Okay, great. Now there's one more thing that I want to do. And what I want to do is actually, before I add any margins, I want to actually make sure that these elements are in the center, just like how you saw it in the UI and in the demo. So we're going to create a generic, or not a generic, but like a more base wrapper component. It's basically just going to be like a base container that's just going to be responsible for setting all the styles, like the base styles. So basically, instead of having to redefine all the same styles again, we'll have all our styles that we'll reuse all in here, and then we will use it in all of in all the application. So let's just call this application root styles. Not the best name, but we'll leave it like that. So this is just going to basically allow us to center our forms and everything inside the center, because we're not really going to have anything else. So we'll just set the display to flex. We'll set justify content to center and align items to center. Now this will ensure that we have a height of 100%, not pixels, 100%. So we'll need to set that to 100% for the height. Okay, now we go into app.js, and all we do is we can just get rid of this div. Okay. And now, let's see. Seems like I think this might actually be a problem. Yeah, the height is not spanning, and the reason why is because we actually need to go into index.css. We need to reference the root ID, which is the ID of this element over here. And you only need to do this if you want the height to be 100%. Okay. So that should actually fix that. I'm not sure why. Oh, we also need to do HTML and body. Set to 100%. Okay, great. Now, actually, I don't really like... let me actually get rid of these. Because I actually don't like setting... I actually don't quite like doing global margin and font family, so I'm just going to get rid of that. And I'll go back into styles.jsx and inside input container. We will, not input container, sorry, input field. We'll have to actually set the font family to DM Sans. It seems like it actually did change the font for that. So, okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Though I'm also not too sure why. Alright, so the problem right now is that we have this width is happening because of the flexbox. So we need to actually set a width for our component. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'll actually wrap this form inside a div. And this div, I'm going to give it a class name. And I'm just going to give this a class name of base form styles. Or actually, I'll just call this base form. And what I can actually do is I can either reference this CSS class. I can actually set up the styles inside index.css, or I can set up inside style components, inside application root styles, because application root styles is the parent of this div. So if I were to reference it inside this template string like this, I can set a base width of whatever I want, and you'll see that we now have a width. Okay, I think the best thing that I'll do is I'll set it to maybe 650 pixels, and I think this will be good enough. Okay, awesome. And now what I want to do is now I'm going to actually set the margin. For the margin, I'll just set the margin on the top and the bottom containers, the input containers. So Style margin, we'll do, let's do 5 pixels, 0. So top and bottom. And then we'll do another one. There we go. So it should be 5 pixels. Actually, let me do 10 instead. Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, now the background color, let me actually change it to a different color. We're gonna change that from black to 1B, 1B, 1B. I only had the background color set to black just so I can actually see if the height actually fixed. But it was pretty obvious because the form was up there. Okay, great. So our application is looking pretty cool. Okay, now the last thing that we'll really need to style is the button. And that will be pretty easy. So let's go ahead and reference style.button. And let's just import this. So you want to make sure you import inside form, because that way when you actually click on the button, it'll automatically submit the form for you. However, we're actually going to have to integrate React Hook form. So we want to make sure we have the button working as a submit button. Okay, not just a regular button, but an actual submit button. Okay, so let's put that button there. And if we look at it, there's nothing there. You can see that when we click on it, you can see the page actually refreshes and you can see the question mark on the top. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just pass in text for the button children. So we'll just call this, let's call it next, because it goes to the next step. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to actually style this. So the way we're going to style this is we're going to first get rid of this outline. Well, first let me add some padding to it. So let's give it a padding of, let's try 30, not 30, let's try top and bottom 10 pixels, left and right 30 pixels. And let's try font size. Let's give the font size to 16 pixels. Let's try 18 pixels. Okay. The font family, we'll set that to DM Sans. Okay, and I think I don't want to set, I mean, I could set a fixed width on this if I really want to. So we can do that. Or you can just, set a bigger padding, but there are some, I would not, obviously rely on that heavily. Whoops. Not sure why that padding on the, let's see. Oh, I forgot we have width set. That's why. Okay, there we go. Okay, let's just use padding for now. Okay, because I don't want to set like a fixed width on this. And I think let's try 20 top. Actually, no, it's too big. Let's try 12 pixels top and bottom. Okay, now let's get rid of this. I know there's this outline, this border. So let's get rid of any outline. So we'll set the outline to none, and the border to none. Just for now. Yeah, you can see that the border was there. It's just that the background color was hiding it, as you can see over here. Okay. So let's just get rid of that. I think the border we'll just ignore for now. We won't set a border. All right. So for the background color for the button, we're just going to set it to the color that I had in the UI in the mockup. So let me just get that color. So we'll do background color. Okay, and we'll also set the cursor to pointer. So when we actually, if hover over this, or if our mouse enters the button, it'll have a cursor. We'll set the color to white. So we'll just use FFF. So I actually did fix the other color. So before I used the white word, I'm just going to use the actual hex value, the shorthand hex value. I actually read a couple days ago that it was bad practice to actually use the name, like the word instead of the hex value. For the border radius, we'll set this to 5 pixels, and we'll just add a different background color whenever we hover over it. So let's just do that. So hover over it. Cool. Okay. And we can also add one so when it's active, you can also give it a different background color. So active is when you actually click on it, right? When you click on it. And I think if you were to actually enter it too, like if you were to hit enter on the button, I think that would also work. Okay. You can also add a focus too, but I'll leave that for you guys. Okay. So the last thing that I'll do is let me go and use the flex component that I had earlier, that I created earlier. And what I want to do is I want to actually set the, I want to make this flex. I want this to actually go all the way to the end. So I think the best thing to do for justify content is to pass in flex end. So justify content flex end. Whoops, did I delete something by accident? Yeah. So justify content flex end. There we go. So that will move this all the way to the end. Okay, and if we were to add other buttons, it would just be right next to each other. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much it for the basics of our button. Okay, it doesn't look, anything too crazy. Let me actually lower the pixels for padding. I think 60 is just fine. Okay, cool. So we have a basic form. Okay, nothing super crazy. Okay, so that's pretty much just going to be it for the contact form. So I can't believe it took us about like 45 minutes to style a simple form, but just goes to show is that sometimes CSS isn't really the most easiest thing. But hopefully, like the styling made sense. Okay, and let me actually go ahead and get rid of the input error right over here. Okay, because we only want to display it dynamically. Okay, so now I promise you, there's no more styling I have to worry about. Not until we get to the progress step bar. Okay, now what we need to worry about is we need to worry about integrating React hook form with our form. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and import the use form hook. So I can just auto import that by calling use form because I have React hook form installed. So that'll just auto import. And use form is a hook. Okay, and when you call use form, it actually returns a lot of properties. It returns an object with a bunch of properties. Let's actually take a look at what those properties are. So if we look in the console, and if I click on object, you can see that we have a lot of properties. A lot of these properties are actually functions. Some of these properties are also objects that have other properties as well. Okay, but we're only going to worry about a few properties, so don't worry. So what we're going to do is we're going to destructure all of the properties that we need. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and destructure the register property, which is actually a function that is going to allow us to register a input field to set it up for validation. We're going to destructure the handle submit function. This function is responsible for invoking our submit handler whenever validation passes. Okay, so if you've worked with HTML forms before, you should be familiar with the onSubmit handler. Basically, you can pass in a callback function, and it'll pretty much invoke this function whenever you click on the submit button. Okay, so the parameter for this callback function is the event property, and if we call it event.preventDefault, you can see that every single time it calls hello. I just wanted to point that out real quick. So what the handle submit function does is it actually wraps our own custom submit handler, and it will only invoke that function if the validation passes. Okay, and the last thing that we will destructure is form state. Now this is actually going to give us an object, and inside that object we will need the errors property. So this is how we're actually going to keep track of all the errors, and it's going to allow us to conditionally render the error messages whenever it's appropriate. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit more with React hook form, but if you guys are more curious, I do have a video on my channel that goes into details about React Hook Form. Okay, so right now let's go ahead and actually register our input field. So we'll register first name and we'll register last name. So to register our input field to set up for validation, all we got to do is just call the register function. So we can do that by simply calling register. Okay, so let's go inside, let's see, input field right over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let's actually console log register. Let's console the function call. And I want to show you guys what it actually is returning. So, and I know I'm going a little bit in depth, but excuse me for that. Okay, so basically it's going to return this object. Okay, it's going to return the name. And if you actually pay close attention, you can see that all of these properties that are being returned, these are all valid properties that can be passed in as props to the HTML input element. So all we got to really do is just call register, pass in the unique key, which is first name. And this has to be unique. This is how it's going to register your input field. Okay, we just have to call register and destructure it, and we can destructure the object that is being returned. So to make things simple, we can just simply do ... register first name. First name, and we're done. Very simple. And we can do the same thing for last name. Okay, just wanted to mention that real quickly for those who may not be familiar with React Hook Form. But like I said, check out my channel. I have a video that talks about React Hook Form. It's definitely worth checking out. Okay, I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm assuming that you guys already know a lot of these things, but I figured I would just mention it, just very quickly. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually set up validation for this input field. So now that we passed in the key, we're going to pass in a second argument, which is going to be an options. And this is where we're going to set up the validation rules. So there's a lot of validation rules that you can have with React Hook Form that you can integrate with your form fields. To make things simple, we'll just make it so that you have to actually just input a first name. So it's very simple. We can actually just pass in the required property. And you can just pass in either a Boolean value or a string. But we want a custom error message, so we'll just pass in a string. And we'll just say first name required. So what happens is when we actually render the error message, it will actually show first name required. And if I console log errors now, that is where all of the errors are going to be retrieved from. That's where all of the errors are being stored as we are actually, updating the state of our form. So let me go ahead, and if I were to click next, first actually we need to set up the onSubmit handler. So let's do that. So let's create a function. Let's just call onSubmit, and the parameter is just going to be all of our form fields in an object form. Okay, and remember, this function is only going to be called whenever validation succeeds. So it's not going to call this function if validation fails. So now that we have our function, okay, you can call this whatever you want. We're going to go ahead and pass this function as a parameter for handle submit. Okay, so handle submit is a function that takes in the submit function, the onSubmit function handler. Okay, so pretty much like I said, it's going to go ahead and validate our form, and if validation succeeds, it's going to invoke this onSubmit function. If it fails, then it will not invoke onSubmit. If you want to handle errors, which we will actually need to do later, I think I got the parameters correctly. You can actually just pass in a second parameter called onError. Okay, so we'll actually need to worry about that later. So we'll just leave that there for now. So now if I click on next, let's take a look at line 18. So line 18 is this errors object over here. And you can see that on line 18, you can see that we have this first name property inside this object. And you can see that errors.firstname gives us an object as well. It gives us the message, the type, and it gives us the ref, so that's the actual input itself. And you can see that the message is the message that we actually typed, so first name required. and you can see the type of the error, which is a required, because remember, there's different types of validation rules, so it makes it very customizable. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do is we're only going to conditionally render input error now. So we're going to go ahead and just check to see if errors dot first name is truthy, and if that is, we're going to go ahead and pass in input error, and then for the children, we'll pass in errors dot first name dot message. So for the children attribute, we'll just pass that in. So now if I do that, you'll see that we can see our validation. We can see our error message. Now we also want the red border around the input container. So what we'll do is for input container, we're going to expect the prop. So let's do that real quick. So for input container, we'll simply just pass in an error prop, and for the value of that error, we'll just simply pass in errors.firstName. So this will be a truthy or falsy value. And in the styled component, all we'll literally do is just reference the props property, okay, inside the template syntax. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna check to see if props.error is truthy. And if that's truthy, we're gonna go ahead and actually use the CSS. We're gonna use the CSS. I'm not really sure what this is called. I think this is a function, but this actually allows you to. It's basically the same thing with styled components. So you can pass in template literals, and with this, you can actually set up any styles you want. The only style that we will set up is the border. So I think 1 pixel solid red would be just fine. You can do 2 pixels if you really want to, or 3. It's really up to you. Okay, and notice how that when I type, as soon as I type, the error is actually going to be removed automatically, because underneath the hood, React Hook Form takes care of the state for us. If you actually paid close attention to the return value of register, you'll remember that it actually returned the onChange function, which is actually being passed on as a prop into the input field, and it takes care of listening to the onChange events. So if I were to do, one more over here, you'll see that onChange is there, and this literally takes care of listening and keeping track of the state for us. So we don't literally need to do anything additional. This is why React Hook Form is powerful. Okay, moving on, let's go ahead and set up validation for our second input field. So for error, we'll do errors.lastName now. And keep in mind that whatever you pass in for the key for register is literally going to be the same property that you're going to have to reference. So if you change this to, let's say, name, then it'll be errors.name. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, so we have errors.lastName. Good. For the required, let's just pass in the same thing. We'll just say last name required. And for input error, we'll do the same thing. We'll do the same conditional render. So we'll check to see if errors.lastName instead is truthy. Okay, and then errors.lastName.message will be passing for the input error child. Okay, so now if I click on next, you're gonna see that let's see what's going on over here. Oh, we actually didn't wrap this. We didn't wrap this. How did I forget to wrap this? That's so silly. I forgot to wrap this div inside a flex. There we go. So now we have validation. Cool. So now look what happens if we type. It gets rid of the error. Okay. Now if I actually click on the submit button, you'll actually see that the page actually does not refresh anymore. Okay, the page does not refresh anymore, and the onSubmit function is actually being invoked. Now let me actually go ahead and console log the errors and error arguments that are passing, or the parameters for the onError function. But you'll see that on line 21, we have first and last name that's being logged in this object. Okay, and if I were to, let me actually go ahead and, okay, so let's click on submit. So notice what happens is inside the onError function, we can see that on line 25 and 26, we have the errors, okay, and then we have the event. Okay, and that's the submit event. So I think, I don't know why they call it, I got this from the documentation. I don't know why they call it error. It really is, it actually is the events, I think. Yeah, it should be called event. So you can see we have the errors and we have the event. Okay, pretty cool. So now if I type, you can see that, so underneath the hood, it actually prevents default. So it won't refresh the page, or, you know, it won't actually submit the form. It'll prevent default. Okay, and now from here in on submit, we can actually do whatever we want. We can go to the next form, and that's pretty much the idea of this whole multi-step form, is that we want to be able to go from one form to the next one. Okay, so the question is, how do we actually go to the next form, right? We have this contact form. We want to go from the contact form to the email form. How do we do that? Okay, so before we do that, let's actually build out the email form first. So this email form is going to be very, very simple. We're going to import a lot of the same things. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste the styles. For the component, we'll just simply export const email form. Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the same hook and destructure the same functions and properties that we need. And we'll also need the same on submit and on error functions. Okay, and I already explained everything already when we handle the contact form, so I don't want to like re-explain everything. So I'm just going to kind of speed through everything because we are hitting that 1 hour mark already. So let's go ahead and return our JSX. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to wrap everything inside a div because we want to give it that base form class. So let's go ahead and do that. So this will give us that fixed width. And for the form, we will have our on submit. So literally, like I said, it's just the same exact thing. Okay, and the same thing for input container. We're only going to have one input container, and that's literally just going to be for email. Okay, and we'll add the button as well. So what we need to do is we need to do some modifications. So inside email form, instead of errors.firstname, it's going to be errors.email. Okay, instead of let me actually double check the contact form to make sure I have the last name correctly. Okay, good. Okay, so instead of HTML4 and setting the attribute of that to first name, we're going to set that to email. And for the label, it's going to be email. The flex and the style for the margin, that's just going to stay the same. We can actually get rid of the margin because it's just like this email is only going to be one. Like this email container is only going to be one field. Okay. It's going to be errors.email. Okay, and then errors.email.message. We're going to change the ID to email and then change register to email. And we'll go ahead and just say email is required. Okay. And the nice thing about you dealing with emails is that you can actually set the type to email. So if you actually don't like pass an eval email, the default HTML validation will be triggered. But I would recommend, based off what I've read on Stack Overflow, they recommended that you don't use regular expressions to validate emails. If you want, you can actually just validate the email using like your own backend API, and you can actually call an API to do validation before you go on to the next step. And React Hook Form actually supports that, so you don't have to actually manually invoke a separate function. You can actually just handle that with React Hook Form, and React Hook Form will wait for the response of the API before proceeding to the next step. Okay, so just thought I would mention that. Okay, so we have our email form, and I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that this email form actually works. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go inside app.css. And I'm going to get rid of contact form, and so we're going to do email form instead. Okay. Oh, wait, let me actually add that margin again. Because I wanted that margin. I actually want that margin back. Because I want that margin. Yep, there we go. Okay. So email is required. Now, if I were to type something, you can see that it will not submit the form. Okay. And you can see that the error objects were being logged. Okay. Let me actually wait a minute. Hold on. Okay. So let's do at gmail.com. And you can see now that validation passes, it's going to give us the email. Okay, so if I were to just not type anything in, you can see the email is over here on line 23 inside the errors, and we have the event. Okay, it works the same exact way. The only thing that we need to worry about is getting to each step. Now, before we actually get the functionalities working, let's finish working on the forms. I don't want to go all over the place. So for the email form and for basically any form that is not the first form is going to need the previous button or a button to go back. So we'll go ahead and add a second button for the email form. Now for the button, we're going to actually give it some different styling because we want to have a primary and a secondary button. You don't want to have two buttons with the same color because like different buttons represent different actions. So we're going to just have, we're going to be able to pass in a prop called primary. Okay, so if the prop is primary, then the styles will be the default styles that we have over here. If it's a secondary, or if it's not primary, we'll just leave it as secondary, which will be different styles. Okay, so all we're gonna do is we're just gonna go inside the button, and we'll just simply say we'll do this. So props.primary. So if that's true, we'll use this CSS, and we'll simply set the background color. We're gonna go ahead and set the background color, the hover, and everything to that. So you can see if I do that, it'll work just fine. Let's also make sure that we pass in a secondary as well, because I don't really feel comfortable just setting these as default. But I think actually, you know what? I think what we'll do instead is by default we'll set these styles to primary, and we'll actually make it so that if they pass in a secondary prop, then we'll set the styles. Okay, I think that would be better. So for background color, we will set the background color to I think none. No. Okay, so we'll unset it. And all we'll do is I actually wish I had the mockup for that. I don't have a mockup for the button, but I actually gave it a border. So border 1px solid FFF. Okay, very simple. We'll get rid of the hover. Okay, good. And we'll also need to make sure that this button, we'll add some margin to it too. I can actually also just add some padding in the flex box, but I'll just set the margin for now. So margin, so top and bottom will be 0. Left and right will do maybe 10 pixels, I guess. Yeah, that's fine. And we'll also need to make sure we actually set the button type to be a regular button, because you'll actually see that this button is actually able to control this form field, right? So we will just need to set the type to a button. Whoops. There we go. Okay. So essentially, this button is going to be responsible for just going back to the previous form, the previous step. Okay, so that's pretty much our email form. And now let's go ahead and work on the mobile form. And this one, I'm just going to kind of like speed through this one. I'll just copy and paste everything because really it's just the same thing as everything else. The only thing that's going to be relatively different is the validation. So we'll actually add another rule. So, and I'll show you guys that in just a second. So first, let's just change up everything. So let's just set errors.mobile instead of errors.email. Let's change everything up to the correct reference property. So errors.email. So instead of errors.email, it'll be errors.mobile. So the ID will be mobile. The type, we can actually just leave the type alone. We'll register as mobile, and we'll say mobile is required. Okay, so for the mobile, we're gonna make this slightly different. And in terms of different, what I mean by that is it's just going to have an extra validation rule. That's literally all it's gonna have. Okay, so right now, if I type stuff, we're not validating to see if this mobile number is valid or not. So it passes when we actually click submit, right? So we want to actually make sure that we are validating our mobile numbers, okay? And just a quick tip, you want to also make sure that you're validating both on the front end and the back end. Always validate both front end and back end, okay? Because you never know on the back end, right? You never know if the user is actually going to send the data from your actual web app, because they can spin up Postman, and they can always literally just send you data from Postman to your API. And if you don't validate on the back end, you're going to be screwed. Okay. Before we move on, let me actually just do one more thing. Let me actually set the box sizing to border box, because I don't even know if I can even realize how much of a change. Is actually, yeah. Let me do that real quick, and let me actually just go ahead and just give it a border. Yeah, actually, I don't really like that. I guess it's because the problem that I have is that this secondary button looks slightly bigger, but it's fine. Not a huge deal. At least for now. Okay, cool. I was hoping that the box sizing would have fixed it, but I think we'll just leave it like this for now. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go back to our mobile field. And I don't mean to go super off topic. Sometimes there's just little things that irk me, and I just need to attend to them. So I apologize if I keep going, back and forth. But all right, let's just focus. So what we need to do is we need to add validation for the mobile number. So we're going to make some assumptions. We're just going to assume that the user is only going to be able to allow to enter valid US numbers. So again, this is based on your application and your market. Like if you are marketing to only US citizens, then you can assume that that their mobile number is going to be a US number, and they can only enter in a US number. So we can do things such as excluding country codes, and we can assume that every single number that they pass in must be 10 digits. So what we'll do is we'll say required, we'll leave required alone. We'll also do one more thing. I think pattern is what we want to do. So we're going to validate with a regular expression. So we want to make sure that, let's see, the message will just say invalid mobile number. So that's going to be the error message if they type in an invalid number. And the pattern, or not pattern, value is the property. So this is going to be a regular expression. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that they are, oh wait, I'm sorry. It's going to be caret sign and then /d. And we want it to be exactly 10 characters. Okay, no more, no less. So if I go ahead and I'm sorry, not 10 characters, 10 digits, sorry. So /d is for digits, numbers. So if I were to type in letters, right, it would say invalid. Now if I type in numbers, it would still say invalid because it doesn't match the regular expression. So let's say we have 7 digits. We need 3 more, so 111. And notice how it gets rid of the mobile number. If I were to type 1 more, it would say invalid. Now I'm going to go ahead and just set the max length to 10. Okay. I actually think if I set max length to 10 here, I actually think that should control it. No, that won't. Yeah, that won't. It'll actually give you an error right over here. Yep. So, but I think I'll just set the max length to 10 just to make it easier. Okay, cool. And you can see that the default HTML validation was there. Okay, cool. So now we have a valid mobile number. If I delete it, it'll get rid of it. If I add it back, it'll add the error message. If I add in a non-numeric value, like a letter or a character, it won't work. Okay, so we have all of our forms. Let me just double check to make sure everything is good. Seems like everything is good. Let me go ahead and do one more thing for the mobile form and the email form. We're just going to go ahead and add a function. Let's just call this go back. And this is just going to be a function that is just going to be invoked to go back to the previous step. So since there's no previous step for the contact form, we will need to add that. Okay, so now the next part of the tutorial, which is, I'm just going to continue with it. This next part, we're going to go ahead and actually set up the integration with going between each step. So in order for us to set that up, we're going to need to actually have a way to share data between each component. So each component is going to be able to update as well as share data, so they know which step to go next to. So essentially, the way that it's going to work is that we're going to start off with the first step. Let me actually open up the Figma wireframe. So let's just look at the progress bar. So we have first thing, we have email, mobile, password. Well, we don't have password. Okay, so let's just ignore password for now. So we have the first name and last name step. When we click on next, it goes to email. When we go to email, we click on next, it goes to mobile, and we go to review after mobile. And we can always go to the previous step if we want to. Okay, so essentially, what we need to do is we need to keep track of the current step. The way that we're going to keep track of the current step is we're going to have a React context that's going to pretty much be responsible for keeping track of which step we're currently on. And we're also going to allow the components to update the React context by pretty much updating the current step. So for example, inside contact form, we're going to be updating the context so that it'll update the context from, it'll update the step from contact form to email form. Okay, contact form, remember contact form cannot go to any previous step. It's the very first step. So the only step that it can update to is the email form. The email form can update either the contact form, it can go back to the contact form, or it can update to the mobile form step. Okay, so you can go either direction. And likewise, the mobile form can go back to the email step, or it can go to the review step. And the review step can only go to the mobile step. Okay, because the review form is really the last step. It will just, submit the data to the API or whatever implementation you do. Okay, so pretty much we're going to have React context, which is going to store the current step, and it's also going to provide a function for the consumers. So basically, our form components are going to consume those values. It's going to consume the step as well as the function to update the step, and it's going to allow us to actually update the context. Okay, now where all the magic happens is we're actually going to conditionally render the form based on the current step, and for that we're going to just create a function that has a switch case, and it'll return the appropriate form for us. Okay, so let me actually just give you a demonstration before we jump into the context. So let's go ahead and create a function And actually, let me go ahead and move this to a helpers.ts, or not ts, js x file. So let's go ahead and create a function called export const get current form. Okay. And we're going to take in a step. Okay. So this step is going to be the current step that we are currently on. So the steps can be either the contact step, email step, mobile step, or review step. Okay. And we'll also have 2 additional steps for success or error. So we're going to have a switch case. So this switch case is going to have a condition for the step. And for the cases, we're just going to have, for now, we'll just have contact step. And we'll return the contact form. Now what I'll actually do is I'm going to actually create a constants.jsx file. Actually, let me change to constants.js because we won't have any JSX in here. So we're just going to create an object. So export const steps. So since we're not using TypeScript, I'm just going to treat this as if it's in like an enum. So steps for context step, it will be context step, email step, mobile step, and then what's next? Review. Because I don't want to just have hard-coded values, because we might need to reference this over and over again. And if we were to update this, if we were to update, you know, the value of the step, like let's say we want to change the name from mobile step to mobile number step, instead of having to update in every single file, we just like update it in one area and it'll be changed in every single file. Like the value will be updated. Let's do error step, and let's do success. So just a total of 6 steps, okay? And error and success, like I said, will be triggered based on the response of, like, you know, the API, for example. Okay, so let me go back here and let me go ahead and just do steps. Let's import that constant. Let's do steps on contact. And let's copy and paste this a couple times. So let's just go down the switch case. So we have contact form, email form. We're going to have mobile form. It's a good thing we have all of our forms. Review. We'll also need to handle success, error, and then a default case. So default, for now, we'll just return null. Okay. So for the review, I'm just going to go ahead and just have an H1. Okay. And actually, well, for now, we'll leave this. Actually, we have the review form details. Let me go ahead and just create that real quick. I forgot we created all of those. I forgot we created all of those components, or not the component files earlier. So we'll populate this later, because the only way we can actually show all of the fields is setting up the context. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit more what we're going to do with that. So review form details. I guess it doesn't want to auto import it for us. Components, review form details. Okay. And for the success and error, we'll just leave that alone for now. I'll just have a simple H1. Cool. And actually, instead of returning null, just return invalid step. Please refresh the page. All right. So this function is going to return the correct component based on the current step. So if we were to actually use this in our application, right, the way that it would work is we'd simply just call get current form. We'd pass in the actual step. So let's just reference steps. Let's just pass in a random one. So step.contact. Okay. And this is our switch case working just fine. Okay. If I were to pass in steps.email, we can see that email step is now rendered. Mobile. This is just all conditional rendering. That's literally all it is. Okay. Now, like I said, we need to keep track of the step using React context, and we're also going to be using the useState hook. Okay. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and create the context first. So what I'll do is inside utils, I'll create a file called let's see, let's call this we're actually gonna need two contexts, one for the step and one for the actual form fields. So for the step, we'll call this form step context.jsx, and this actually this context file we're gonna need to import the create context function. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and create a named export called form step context. And we're going to call create context. And we're going to need to pass in default values. Okay. So the default value is just going to basically be two properties inside this object. It's just going to be step. And we're going to have a function that's going to be responsible for updating the step. So I think this function, we can just get away with using the function that we're going to have for the state variable. So I'm just going to call this set step for now, and we're just going to leave this to just be an empty a function that literally just does nothing. Now for the step, I'm just going to set the default value to steps dot contact, because that's the first step. Okay, and now all we're going to do is we're going to wrap our entire application with form step context, because we're going to wrap it with the provider. Because in order to actually retrieve the actual values that you need from the context, you need to make sure that the component that is basically consuming that context is wrapped inside the provider of the context, right? So we're going to go ahead and import form step context, and we're going to reference provider. Okay. Now we're not done yet. We need to pass in values for the provider. Okay, so for the values, we need to pass in step and set step. Now, the way that we're going to get these values is we're going to create a state variable inside this app component. So we're going to call use state. Okay, and this is just we're just going to return step and set step. That's just what we're going to name the return values of the state variable and the setter. And we're going to set the default value to steps dot contact. Yep, perfect. Okay, cool. So let's actually go ahead, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. So just an example, right? Let me go ahead. So instead of instead of just manually passing in the step, well, in a way, this actually is hard coding, but we want this to be dynamic. So we're going to pass in this step inside get current form, and you're going to see that it's going to give us the contact form. And essentially, it's literally whatever this value is, whatever the state value is. Okay. And we're going to need to update the state. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and update the value of the context. Okay. Now we're going to need to actually consume. We're going to need to consume the context. So there's multiple ways they can do that. You can actually do that by simply having something like form step context.consumer. Okay. And then you can have your values over here. So value, and but obviously I would not recommend doing it this way, right? Like I would not recommend doing it this way because you know, I just wouldn't recommend it. I mean, you could do this, you could get away with this, but I would recommend using the hook instead, using the use context hook. Okay. So what we're going to do is inside all the components, so pretty much any component that is going to be returned from this get current form is going to be wrapped inside our context provider. So all we got to do now is we just got to go inside each component, and all we got to do is just call the use context hook. Okay, So I'll give you guys one example. So inside contact form, okay, we're gonna go ahead and call const use context, and we're gonna pass in form step context, just form step context, not provider or consumer, just for step context. And we can actually get the step and then the set step function. Okay, so if I actually console log step, okay, you can see that we're on the contact step. Now let me actually go ahead and just simply render the current step just so we can see it. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and update set step. So this function set step, the actual implementation, is literally, it works the same way. So if we were to actually update this step variable, we would literally just call set step and pass in the value. Okay, so since we're using this function as our updater function, all we got to do is just call set step and then pass the next step like this. So the next step is going to be email. So watch what happens when I click submit and see what happens. It goes to the next step, and you can see that it's being controlled right over here. It's working as expected. We updated the step. Okay, so set step is basically going to be invoked. It's basically calling this setter function. Okay, and this function is responsible for setting step. So when this state variable step is updated, well, the value is passed back into this provider, and then the provider is going to provide these updated values, and for get current form, we're going to basically get the actual form, the correct form that we want. So email step. Okay, now if I were to go into email form now, and if the submit was successful, we can literally do the same thing. So let's go ahead and we won't actually need the step field. We will just need the set step function. So form step context. And all I'm going to do is just going to call set step and pass in steps dot mobile. So now so right now we're in contact step. So now we're going to go from email to mobile. Okay. And from mobile, it should go from mobile to review. So we're going to do the same thing in mobile. We're going to go ahead and get the set step function by calling the use context hook and passing in the correct context. Now when we call set step, all we got to do is just pass in steps and then the correct step. And then now let's just enter in some stuff. And yes, I do know that if you type in @ and then you don't actually pass in like an actual domain like .com or .org, this actually passes. But like I said, I would recommend doing validation server side, like calling the API, checking see if the email is valid, and then returning that response. So let's pass this in. Let's see what's going on here. Steps.review. Seems like we have an error, so let's see what's going on over here. Steps.review. Okay, so we passed in steps.review, and it's supposed to return review form details. Oh, there we go. I wasn't returning anything, so it's passing invalid number and then passing the valid one, and now we're on the review step. Okay, so you can see that it's working just fine. And now let's actually go ahead and set it up for when we go back. So we'll need to set it up for everything except for the contact form, because contact form you can't go back, right? So let me go ahead and go into email form first. So literally all we're literally going to do is just call set step and then set the step to so from email it's just going to go to contact, and we just need to invoke so we just need to invoke this function whenever the whoops, wait, sorry, not for next button, for the previous button, for the back button. So on go back. There we go. Okay, so this is for the go back button. So if I refresh, just type this. If I go back, it will bring me back to the contact step. Okay, so let's go into let's see, mobile form. Let's do the same thing. So set steps dot email. So we're going back from mobile to email, and let's just do that. So on click, and we're gonna go from review to we're gonna go from the review to mobile. So for now, what I'm gonna do is, let me actually do this. Let me go ahead and just give this a class name of base form. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add the buttons that I need. So like I said, review form is just gonna have 2 buttons. It's gonna have a button to go back, and it's gonna have a button to go next. When next is clicked, it's not gonna go to any other form. It's just gonna call some API. But like I said, that could differ based on your implementation. Okay. So let's go ahead and set up go back. We're gonna need to get the function from the context. So let's import the use context hook. Okay, and let's go from review to mobile. Okay. And let's see, right now this should look like this. Good, so it's able to go back. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. We'll actually add the details. We'll add the details later. So the problem is that so this actually is going to be the next thing that we're gonna have to address. So it seems like right now our functionality works fine. We're able to go back and forth between each step. But the problem is that whenever we go back to the previous step, the fields are pretty much reset, and we need to keep track of them. We need to actually provide the fields that the user entered. Right? That would be a really bad experience for the user. And in fact, we actually aren't even keeping track of the state of each field, because once we actually go to the next step, an entirely new component is rendered. So we don't even have the state of that component anymore. So this is where we are going to use, we're going to use another context to store all of the properties that we need for our, or not properties, I should say form field properties for our form. Okay, so we're going to be able to store the contact, we're going to be able to store the email address, and we're going to be able to store the the mobile number. Okay, so that's pretty much going to be the next part of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and get to that. So let me go ahead and just get rid of that h1 tag, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create another context, and let me actually just create a folder called contexts, and this is this form step context is going to be moved inside here, and we're going to create one called form fields context.jsx. Okay, and let's just go ahead and import create context, and we're going to do export const form field context. Let's call it form fields context. And we're going to call create context, and we're going to have fields is just going to be an object. And now for our function to update the fields, we can't actually we're not going to call this set fields, because that's what we're going to call the state variable updater function, the setter function for our state variable in the app component. Okay, so we're going to call this update fields instead of set fields. So now this function is actually, we're actually going to need to create a wrapper function inside app.js that's going to be responsible for updating the state. And the reason why is it's just going to be a lot easier, because we're actually going to need to update state a little bit differently, because we can't just pass in like, a value and just call it a day. We're going to actually need to, I mean, maybe we could, I'm not entirely sure, but I'll show you exactly what we're going to do. So we have the form fields context. Okay, let's actually create a simple mock of how our fields are going to look like. So export const default fields. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have contact. So this is for the contact step. So it's going to be first name, last name. For email, we'll just have as that, and mobile as that. Okay, so this is what default fields is going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and just pass in this. And now that we have our default fields and we know how our fields are going to look like, we're going to go ahead. So we're done with this context. Now we're going to go ahead and set up the state in the function in the app component level. So const fields, set fields. Use state. We'll pass in default fields. Okay. And now we're going to create the function update fields. And this is basically going to take in two parameters. It's going to take in the field that we want to update, and it's going to take in the value. Okay. Now, if we actually weren't to create update fields, I think what we need to do actually in each individual component. So we basically have set fields, and we need to actually call set fields. I think we would actually need to modify the existing object. So we would need to do something like fields. Actually, I think maybe, let me actually no, never mind. Because what would happen is we would actually need to do that same exact thing inside every single function. And I don't want to do that, so we'll just leave it like this for now. Okay? Because essentially what we need to do is we need to actually get the current fields. We need to create a copy of it, reference the appropriate field name, and update state. I think that might be a little bit better, but we'll see later. So for update fields, what we'll need to do is we'll need to call set step. So what I'll do is I'll create a new copy of fields. So let's just do ... fields. And then we'll reference the correct field that we want to update. So new fields use square bracket because we're passing the field name as a parameter. So we can't just do new fields dot and then name the field. So we'll set this to whatever value we want to pass in. And now we can just call set fields and then pass in new fields. I think though, we can actually just do this exact thing in each component and we would just be fine. I have not tried that yet because I've always done it this way, but I'm pretty sure we could just do that and we'd be perfectly fine. Okay, but let's just move on. So let's go ahead and import form fields context.provider, and it's literally the same thing. We're going to pass in fields and update fields. And now we just literally go into each component and we're going to call the context that we want. Now what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to create a custom hook. And I'll go ahead and just create a custom hook. And I'll call this custom hook use form use I'm not sure what to call it, use step context or use form state context. Yeah, I think this will be a good name. And let's actually let's do this. Function. There we go. That. Okay, so this literally is just going to be a hook, aka a wrapper function that's just going to call. It's literally just going to call use context twice. So one for form step context and the other one for form fields context. And it's just going to return it. So instead of having to call all these things separately, we're just going to do it in one hook, and we're going to call that one hook. And that hook is going to return everything for us. So you'll see what exactly I'm going to do. Sorry, it's not create context. It's use context. So watch this. So we're going to go ahead and call use context. And contexts, or I'm sorry, not context. Hooks can also return values of context too. Remember that. You can literally do a lot of things with hooks. Remember, hooks provide a lot of functionalities for us. So we'll destructure step and set step. And we'll also do the same thing for fields and update fields. So we'll call use context. So we'll call form fields context. So remember, we have fields and update fields. And actually, we can actually just do this. I actually just remembered. We can actually just do this. We can actually, we don't even need to destructure anything. We can just return these like this using just the dot operator. We can just do that. And even better, I think, I don't know if arrow function hooks are recommended. Yeah, actually, so I just read a Stack Overflow post right now. So since we won't ever need to reference this, we won't need to reference this dot. So we can actually just use an arrow function for this, which actually just makes it a lot more cleaner. Let me go ahead and wrap this. There we go. So I think this is so, and I'm referencing this Stack Overflow post. So, short answer is yes, you can use arrow functions. Yeah, and we can do that because we don't need to use this keyword. Okay, and we don't need to use other keywords like arguments, or we don't need to call the function using new. So I think this should be fine. I don't think we should get any issues. And like I said, they're assuming that you're going to be able to use this custom hook using arrow functions. So it should be fine. Okay, so now watch what we're going to do. So inside contact form, we're going to go ahead and instead of calling use context and then passing a form step context, we're going to go ahead and call use form state context. And we're going to go ahead and get all the necessary values we need. So we need set step. And watch this. It's going to literally work the same way. Okay. So this is just going to, so right now we're just updating. Right now we're just going to the next step. Nothing special. Okay. So let's just first, before we make any rapid changes, let's just go through every single, form, and let's just update everything. Let's just make sure it works, because we also aren't even writing any behavioral test cases too. So use form state context. Okay. So we don't even know if this will change the behavior. So let's just make sure that the behavior works the same way. Okay, good. 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 Why is review details? Okay, that's fine. Cool. Perfect. Okay, cool. Good. Awesome. So this is working just fine. So good. We have created a custom hook that pretty much just returns, all the context that we need. And you can literally add a bunch of stuff, but I would advise not to add too many things because you want to keep your hooks as clean as possible. And you don't want your hook to do too many things, right? That would, that wouldn't be too good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and basically update the state of fields. So essentially what's going to happen is whenever we go through each step, whenever the user clicks on a button, we're going to update the field. Or when they click on the submit button, it's going to update the state. Okay, so right now, if I were to click on next, nothing happens, right? So because we're using a context now to store all the form fields, we can actually keep track of state between every single component. Okay, so what we're gonna do is inside the inside contact form, we'll start off with this. So whenever we click on submit, we're gonna go ahead and call update fields. Okay, and we're gonna call update fields, and what we're gonna do is we're basically just going to pass in the name of the field that we want. So let me actually define this as an object. Export const. Let's just call this fields. So we have contact. So contact So basically, this is just going to match the name of the property of default fields, essentially. So contact, email, mobile, and I think that's all we need to worry about. Okay, so we're going to update fields dot contact, and we're just going to pass in data. So remember, data is basically going to be the object, right? The object that has all of our valid data. And you got to remember that that object is literally going to match the properties are going to be whatever you registered it as. Okay, so you need to make sure that your context, right? You got to make sure that your object matches that as well. Okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to call update fields. That's going to invoke app.js. It's going to invoke this update fields function inside the app component. And what's going on is we're creating a copy of fields, because you don't want to directly update the state. Like, you don't want to do fields dot. You don't want to do that. Okay, especially if you're updating, like, arrays and objects and stuff. So it's better to create a copy of it. So that's what we're doing here using the spreader operator. And then we're basically unpacking all these values and then wrapping it in between curly braces. So now we're basically passing in the field. So fields.contact is basically this contact value over here. And we're basically going to reference contact. And then we're assigning it this object called first name. Okay, now this is actually going to be a little bit tricky, because since this data is actually an object, what we're going to do differently in the email and mobile form is, because there's only two properties. Okay, I'm sorry, there's only one property for each. So we're actually going to just pass in, because right now here we're passing an object, but for email and mobile we're going to actually pass in just a single string. I mean, you could if you want to, you could restructure this. Like, for example, you could change this to email and then email, so you can just be consistent with passing in you can just be consistent with passing in objects. But I mean, I don't really see a point of doing that. I mean, it's really up to you. Okay, I'll leave you guys to worry about that. So we'll pass in update fields and we'll pass in data as is for the contact form. So we'll update the fields first, and then we will set the step. Okay. So now that we've updated the fields, let's just do the same thing for everything as well. Okay. So let's update all the fields and let's render it at the very end so we can see what it looks like. And then we'll move on from there. So email form, let's go ahead and get the update fields. So we'll update fields dot, so this is for email. And so for this, it's just going to be data.email. Okay, because remember, the value is literally just assigned to the property. That's it. Okay. Yeah, I think that should be fine. Okay, then we'll go into let's see, mobile form. We'll do the same exact thing. So we'll get update fields. We're gonna go ahead and call update fields, pass in fields dot mobile, and then pass in data dot mobile. And that should be it. So now let's go into here, and we're gonna render everything. So the way I'm going to render everything using input container, but I'm not going to have an input field. So what I'm going to do is I'm essentially just going to, let me just get rid of all of the things that we don't need. We definitely won't have any error messages. So let's just import input container. If it wants to even, my IntelliSense has been messed up. I honestly think it's because I'm using JavaScript. Well, actually, to be honest with you, that actually isn't even the problem, because this actually happened with TypeScript too. Okay. So I don't know why it does that. Okay, so we actually don't want to import input field. So what we want to do instead is, because input field is an actual field, is an actual form field, what I want to do is I'm going to just basically take, let's see, where is this? Put field. I think what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and create input. I'll just call this, what's a good name to call it? Field, input field details. And what I'll do is I'll just basically do this. I can extend it, I think, like that. But actually, no, this would actually be treated as an input field, and I don't want that. I'm just gonna, yeah, you know, I'm just gonna do style.div, and I'll just basically pass in all these properties. Though we won't need an outline, we won't need a border. Background inherit would be fine. Padding is fine. Okay, yeah, this is fine. Okay, I think font family we can ignore too, but I'll worry about that later. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and so before we had the input field here, so we're gonna go ahead and have input field details, and let's just import that from here. Okay, and we're just literally just going to render the appropriate field. So let's go ahead and get fields. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with my IntelliSense. It's so annoying. Fields dot contact first name. All right, so I was recording and my mic cut out. Like I unplugged my mic by accident. Fortunately, it was just only 4 minutes, but essentially what I just did was I pretty much just copied and pasted everything, and I just rendered it to the screen. Okay, I didn't really do anything crazy. Okay, that's all I did was I just had this input container, and I just displayed everything that needed to be displayed. Okay, that's all I did. So if I were to go here now, and if I were to type in some stuff for our form, we can see that it's being displayed. Okay, that's all I did with you know, all of these fields over here. We have input container. You know, like I said, feel free to pause the video and just, like, you know, change up all the fields that you need to change. Okay, very, very simple. All right, so now the next thing that we got to do is we got to take care of setting the default values. So if I were to go back to my form, you can see that none of these values are there. So what we need to do is let's start with contact form. So the use form hook, right? It takes in a parameter, it takes in an object, and you can pass in default values. So default values is an object, and basically you can just pass in all of the properties. Okay, and then you got to make sure that those property names match what you set up to register the field as. So like I said, if you register this as first name, then the property name is going to be first name. And if I were to just type Jake, right, you're going to see that when I refresh, you'll see that's the default value, and I could fix it up whatever I want. If I refresh, it'll be Jake. So now we want the default values to be whatever it is that is from this field's state variable. Okay, remember, this state variable controls, it keeps all of our state. Okay, and we are passing this down to the provider, so each component can actually get the state. Get the get all the fields. Okay, so what we need to do is we just got to go ahead and just reference fields.contact, or wait, let's do fields.contact, and that's it. We just destructure fields.contact, so this will destructure first and last name. So I don't have to manually do first name fields.contact first. I mean, you could, but this is just a shorthand way of doing it. Okay, so now watch this. If I refresh and let's click on next, if I go back, you're going to see first and last name are there. And if I update it and go back, if I go forward and go back in, you're going to see that it's there. Let's just do Tyler. Click next, go back, you'll see that. Okay, pretty straightforward. Okay, pretty straightforward. And let's go ahead and do that for email. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get the fields property in here. And And when we call use form, let me just move that down here. We'll go ahead and do default values, and then fields is just going to, default values, sorry. It'll be fields dot email. Actually, does that actually work? Let me double check, because I think no. Okay, because email is a literal, and we're trying to do structure. I mean, well, not literal, string literal, and we're trying to destructure string literal. So what we need to do is we can just do fields, and that would be fine, because I mean we don't have any of the other fields registered, so it wouldn't really be much of a problem anyways, right? Like we don't have first name and last name registered on this component, so we can just do it like this. I mean, like I said, if you want to just manually set it to fields.email, that's also an option. It's completely up to you, but you know, it doesn't really matter too much. Okay, and now let's go ahead and do the same for our mobile forms. So let me just move this up here, bring in fields, and we just pass in default values, fields. Let's do mobile, fields.mobile, and then we're good. So let's type in this, go back. Okay. Now the only thing is that if I were to update something and if I click back, it actually won't update anything. So, but I mean, I think you get the gist of it. If you wanted to save, you know, the current state of the form, even when you go back, like if you edit something and go back, you would just update that inside go back. Okay. But I would probably think that probably wouldn't be a good idea, because right now with our go back function, it doesn't actually do any validation. I mean, you could fix that easily by changing this from a type to a submit, and it would only call this function if it goes back. So let me actually try that real quick. So right now we're in the mobile form. So if I try to do this, so yeah, it'll still go back. Like it'll still invoke this go back function, and yeah, it seems like we can only have one handle. We can only have one handler function for the submit button. So yeah, I would just say you don't have to worry so much. But if you really want it, what you could do is you can actually watch the current fields. So there's actually there's actually another property called watch. And what you can do is you can actually watch certain fields. So for example, let me see, const current, what is this, current mobile? So watch, pass in the field that you want to watch. Okay. And you can actually console log current mobile. Okay. And you can see that that's the current state of it, right? So you can use this value to determine whether or not they can go back or not. And I mean, I'm pretty sure if you look in, we're not going to do that, but I'm pretty sure if you look in depth into the documentation, there's definitely a way how you can solve this issue. Okay, but I would say don't worry so much about it. I think this is fine anyways. Okay, so okay, so I just wanted to mention that. All right, cool. So I think that pretty much concludes literally this whole multi-step form. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all of this tutorial for at least the most important thing. Okay, so we pretty much have a working form. Okay, and literally the only thing that you got to do now, and now let's see, let's just do one last thing. I'll just make it so that when we click on next, we just simply on submits, and we'll just create a function called on submits. And like I said, this is just going to be a function called some API. Okay, and then based on the response, you can have like a try catch. I'm not going to do it, but you guys can do it. You can have like a try catch, right? And if the response was successful, you can go ahead and update the step. So you can call set step and update it to the success step. If it wasn't successful, you can go ahead and update it to the error step. I'll let you guys take care of that. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and end this tutorial right here because we are pretty much, I think we are at 2 hours already. Let me actually just double check. We are at we're at 2 hours, and I don't want to prolong this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video right here. I'm going to make a second video that's going to be a follow-up for this video that shows you how to create the progress tracker. So pretty much what you saw earlier in the demonstration, I'm going to show you guys how to create that so you can actually track the current step the user's on. Alright, so that is pretty much going to be it for this video. We are at the 2 hour mark already. We're way past the 2 hour mark. We're like 2 hours and a couple minutes. I don't want to prolong anymore, so I'm going to end this video right here. I do apologize for the video being 2 hours long. I did not intend for it to be too long, but honestly, I think the first part of this tutorial was like the styling. I think I might actually cut this into 3 parts where we have the styling and then the actual React part, and then, but I don't know, we'll see. I did not intend for it to be, this long, but if you guys did watch this whole video, I definitely appreciate it a lot. It really means a lot when people watch my videos. And if you guys, like this video a lot, please definitely leave a comment and, leave a like down below. It really makes me happy because it lets me know that people are watching my videos, and it gives me, a lot of extra reasons to make videos, I definitely like seeing, nice comments and, any feedback too, really. And any interaction down below is in the comments, it would be great and appreciated. If you guys want to get in contact with me, I have a Discord server. Just feel free to join it. There's a link in the description. You can click on it. If you guys want to ask me any questions, you guys can do it on the Discord server. And if you guys want, feel free to subscribe. That is the best way to support the channel and support me. I really appreciate when people subscribe as well. And definitely share this video. So that's going to be pretty much it. I hope you guys learned a lot. And in the next part of this video, I will go ahead and build out the progress step that you saw earlier in the demonstration. And that's going to be it. So I'll see you guys in the next part. If not, peace out. And thank you guys for watching this video. And I'll see you guys in my next tutorial series. Peace.